All right, what's going on? This is Michael Alesi here to present my economics presentation. So, first on the agenda for what I'm going to talk about today, we have trade deficit versus trade surplus. United States operating on a trade deficit, pre 1930s conventional wisdom and how it differs from Keynesian economics, monetary versus fiscal policy, and how these tools are used to improve the economy, business cycle, highest and lowest point on a business cycle, and the difference between recessions and expansions. So, first, I'll be talking about trade deficit versus trade surplus. And basically, what trade deficit is a trade deficit happens when a country imports more goods and services than it exports. So, basically, it means that we, as a country, buy more goods and things that we need to keep our country running, and we sell less things to other countries to give them what they need for their countries to keep running. This means that we spend more money buying from other countries than earns than it earns from selling to them. So a formula to visualize this is trade balance equals exports minus imports, which is a negative result, which a negative result is a trade deficit. And a trade surplus occurs when a country exports more goods and services than it imports, meaning it earns more from foreign sales than it spends on imports. And a formula to visualize this is the same thing, but except trade balance equals exports minus imports, which means that a positive result is a trade surplus. A perfect example of a trade deficit that I could talk about is where we live, the United States. The United States imports more from other countries than it sells exports. It imports goods like electronics, clothing, and machinery from countries such as China and Mexico. It exports products like aircraft, agricultural goods, and services like finance and technology. Because imports exceed exports, the US runs a trade deficit, meaning money flows out of the country to pay for foreign goods and services. So basically, we buy more than we sell. So we're spending more money than receiving money by selling our own products. So we're losing money in the process of buying things and not either breaking even or making more money because of that. Example of trade surpluses are Germany exports more goods and services abroad than it buys imports. So the major exports of Germany are, cars, BMW, Mercedes Benz, machinery and chemicals. Major imports of Germany are energy products, food and consumer goods. This means that Germany earns more money from exports than it spends on imports, creating a trade surplus. So they actually gain money from selling their own products instead of them just keep buying and buying and not selling as much like how the United States does at the moment. So they end up profiting off of what they sell, but we end up just losing money as more as we sell, and that's the difference. The United States operates on a trade deficit because it imports more goods and services than it exports. Like I said, Americans consume a lot of goods, more than the country produces domestically. The United States economy is driven by consumer spending, about 70% of GDP. To meet demand for items like electronics, clothes, and vehicles, the U.S. imports many products from countries where production is cheaper. So we spend less when it comes down to it. Example, the U.S. buys large amounts of electronics from China and cars from Germany. Also, the U.S. exports movies, financial services, and tech software, but imports massive amounts of physical goods like phones, machinery, and oil. Pre 1930s conventional wisdom. During the early years of the Great Depression, most economists and policymakers believed in classic economic ideas that focused on balanced budgets, limited government intervention, and self correcting markets. It assumed markets would naturally recover, but this approach failed to end the Great Depression. So they believed in one way of a way to solve this, but in reality, it never worked out. Never came to plan. Didn't solve the Great Depression. So yeah, for better understanding for the pre 1930s, the 1930s conventional wisdom versus Keynesian economics. So for the 1930s conventional wisdom, the economy will self-correct. Government should do little. Governments should balance the budget even in bad times. Inflation is the main danger, or money goes up and things become more expensive. The gold standard must be preserved for stability. Minimal government involvement in the economy. And then fast forward to the Keynesian economics. The economy can get stuck in depression. Government must act to boost demand. Governments should spend more and run deficits during recessions to create jobs and income. Unemployment and deflation are the bigger threats during downturns. The gold standard limits recovery. Flexible money supply and interest rates help store growth. Active fiscal and monetary policy are essential to stabilize the economy. So two separate opinions, obviously, and two different approaches to this topic. And now for monetary and fiscal policy. First, for monetary policy. Monetary policy is the use of a country's money supply and interest rates to influence the economy. It is usually controlled by a central bank, like the Federal Reserve in the United States. And the tools for the monetary policies are interest rates. Lowering rates encourages borrowing and spending. Raising rates slows the economy. Open market operations, buying and selling government bonds to change money supply. Reserve requirements, changing the amount banks must keep in reserve, affecting lending. And for fiscal policy is the use of government spending and taxation to influence the economy. It is controlled by the government, Congress, and the President in the United States. And the tools of fiscal policy is government spending, infrastructure, infrastructure projects, defense, social programs, and for the taxes, lowering taxes increases disposable income, raising taxes reduces spending. And for monetary policy, it's more just for like summary of it to keep it short and simple. You control the money, but for fiscal policy is control the government spending and the taxes as a whole. And now for a business cycle, what is a business cycle? The business cycle is a natural rise and fall of economic activity over time. It shows how an economy expands and contracts in a repeating pattern. It measures in GDP, employment production, and spending. The highest point is the peak, and the lowest point is the trough. So a peak is when business is booming, you're making money, you have employees, your marketing is doing well. You're spending, but you're profiting off of your products and what you're selling and what you do as a business in general. And the trough is the lowest point where things are not going as well. Your employment rate is going down. People aren't making as much. People aren't as happy as they should be. So it leads to less business being done and being made money wise, and all that type of stuff. So and then recessions versus expansions. For expansions, meaning a period when the economy is growing, you know this when GDP, total economic output, increases, employment rises, people have more jobs, consumer spending and business investment increase, confidence in the economy is generally high. And for recessions, the meaning is a period when the economy is shrinking. You know this when GDP declines for at least two consecutive quarters, unemployment rises, business may lay off workers, consumer spending and investment drop, and confidence in the economy is low. So these are obviously two completely different things. Recession is when it's just it's getting smaller. You're losing employees. The GDP is declining. You know, consumer spending, people buying things people buying your product is going down. People who invested in your own business expenses and investments drop, and and the confidence in the economy is low. But for expansion, people, the things are increasing, business is doing well, people are buying into your business and your product, and your confidence is higher. The GDP is increases. You have more people involved in your business for working for you, for employees, and the economy is growing because of that. It's just two complete opposite things. And yeah, that's really it.